Welcome to Lesson 16.6 on International Funding Overview. This lesson shifts our focus from U.S. domestic funders to the global funding landscape. International funding offers significant opportunities for organizations working on issues that cross borders or have global dimensions. Understanding international funding requires familiarity with different types of funders, varying cultural expectations, and distinct application processes. The international funding landscape includes bilateral aid agencies, multilateral organizations, supranational bodies, and international philanthropies. Each category operates differently and offers unique opportunities. By the end of this lesson, you will understand the major categories of international funders, key differences from U.S. domestic funding, and how to begin positioning your organization for international funding opportunities. International funding merits consideration for several compelling reasons. Expanding beyond U.S. domestic sources enlarges the pool of available resources. Organizations limiting themselves to U.S. funders miss significant funding that may align with their missions. Work with global dimensions often aligns better with international funders. Issues like climate change, global health, migration, and international development have inherently cross-border dimensions that international funders prioritize. International funding enables partnerships and collaboration across borders. Many international opportunities require or encourage multi-country consortia, creating pathways to valuable international relationships. Access to substantial funding pools becomes possible. The European Union's Horizon Europe program, for example, represents one of the world's largest research funding sources. International development agencies collectively manage billions in annual funding. Diversifying organizational funding portfolio through international sources reduces dependence on any single funding environment. Changes in U.S. federal funding, for example, matter less when international sources provide a meaningful portion of organizational revenue. International funding comes from several distinct categories of funders, each with unique characteristics. Bilateral funders are government aid agencies that provide development assistance from one country to others. Examples include USAID from the United States, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, or FCDO from the United Kingdom, and similar agencies in other donor countries. Multilateral funders are intergovernmental organizations funded by multiple member states. Examples include United Nations agencies, the World Bank, and regional development banks. These organizations pool resources from many countries. Supranational funders operate at the regional bloc level. The European Union is the most significant example, with major funding programs like Horizon Europe supporting research and innovation across member states and associated countries. International philanthropy includes large global foundations with missions extending beyond any single country. The Wellcome Trust, Gates Foundation, and similar organizations fund work globally based on thematic priorities rather than national boundaries. Development finance institutions combine philanthropic and investment approaches, providing loans, guarantees, and equity investments alongside grants for development purposes. Bilateral aid agencies implement their country's foreign policy objectives through development assistance. Understanding their structure and priorities is essential for accessing bilateral funding. These agencies focus on priority countries and sectors defined by their governments. USAID priorities, for example, reflect U.S. foreign policy interests. Shifts in government policy can rapidly change agency priorities. USAID is the largest bilateral donor globally, managing billions in annual funding for health, education, economic development, democracy, and humanitarian assistance. U.S. organizations often access USAID funding through contracts or cooperative agreements. The U.K.'s Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office manages British development assistance. Germany's GIZ, Japan's JICA, and similar agencies in other donor countries represent additional bilateral sources. Each has distinct priorities and processes. Bilateral agencies often work through implementing partners and contractors rather than directly funding local organizations. Prime contractors manage large programs and may subcontract to smaller organizations. Understanding these relationships helps identify entry points for accessing bilateral funding. Multilateral organizations pool resources from multiple member countries to address global and regional challenges. United Nations agencies address diverse global challenges. UNICEF focuses on children, WHO on health, UNDP on development, and specialized agencies on specific sectors. Each agency has distinct funding mechanisms and priorities. The World Bank Group supports development worldwide through loans, grants, and technical assistance. The International Development Association, or IDA, provides concessional financing to the poorest countries. The World Bank often contracts with organizations for implementation and technical support. Regional development banks focus on specific geographies. The African Development Bank, Asian Development Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, and European Bank for Reconstruction and Development each serve their regions with development financing and grants. Global health initiatives like the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis and malaria, and Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, represent specialized multilateral mechanisms addressing specific priorities. These initiatives channel significant funding through country-level programs. Multilateral organizations often work through competitive procurement processes resembling contracts more than traditional grants. Proposals respond to specific terms of reference rather than open-ended funding opportunities. The European Union represents the most significant supranational funder, with massive funding programs supporting research, innovation, and development. The EU is among the world's largest research funders, rivaling or exceeding major national funders in total investment. European funding opportunities deserve attention from research organizations worldwide. Horizon Europe is the EU's flagship research and innovation program, with a budget of approximately €95 billion for 2021 through 2027. The program emphasizes scientific excellence, societal challenges, and industrial competitiveness. Structural funds support development within EU member states, particularly in regions with lower economic development. These internal funds differ from external development cooperation. External action funds, managed partly through the European Commission's Directorate General for International Partnerships, support development cooperation globally. These funds address poverty reduction, sustainable development, and humanitarian needs outside Europe. Consortium-based applications are typically required for major EU programs. Proposals usually require partners from multiple countries, emphasizing cross-border collaboration. Building European partnerships is essential for accessing EU funding. International philanthropies operate globally based on thematic priorities rather than national boundaries. Major global foundations represent significant funding sources for aligned work. The Wellcome Trust, based in the UK, is among the world's largest charitable foundations. Wellcome focuses on health research, supporting discovery research, clinical research, and research culture improvements globally. Their funding has significant impact in biomedical and health sciences. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation addresses global health, global development, and U.S. education. Their global health work includes infectious disease, maternal and child health, and health system strengthening. Gates Foundation grants often involve substantial funding amounts. The Open Society Foundations support democracy, human rights, and justice initiatives globally. Founded by George Soros, these foundations work in many countries on issues including media freedom, government accountability, and rule of law. Application processes vary widely across international philanthropies. Some use open application processes, others work primarily through invitation, and many combine approaches. Understanding each foundation's specific processes is essential for effective engagement. International funding differs from U.S. domestic funding in several important ways that affect application strategies and organizational capacity. Application formats and requirements differ significantly from familiar U.S. formats. The European Commission uses specific templates and structures. UN agencies have their own formats. Adapting to these requirements takes time and attention. Consortium and partnership requirements are common in international funding. Many opportunities require multi-country teams or partnerships with local organizations. Building these partnerships before opportunities arise positions you for success. Procurement-style processes are more prevalent internationally. Many multilateral and bilateral opportunities resemble contracts more than grants, with detailed terms of reference, specific deliverables, and evaluation based on value for money rather than narrative persuasion. Currency and financial management add complexity. International funding often involves multiple currencies, international banking, and exchange rate considerations. Organizations need financial systems capable of managing this complexity. Compliance requirements vary by funder and country. International work may trigger regulations in multiple jurisdictions. Understanding these requirements before pursuing international funding prevents compliance problems later. Eligibility for international funding varies significantly across funders and programs, requiring careful attention. U.S. organizations may or may not be eligible depending on the specific funder and program. Some international opportunities are open globally, while others restrict participation. Check eligibility requirements early in opportunity assessment. Some programs restrict eligibility to specific countries, often those where the funder has strategic interests or historical relationships. EU programs, for example, have specific rules about third country participation. Partnership can enable participation when direct eligibility is limited. A U.S. organization might partner with an eligible European organization to participate in Horizon Europe, contributing expertise while the European partner serves as coordinator. Registration requirements may apply in countries where funders are based. The European Commission requires registration in their participant portal. Some bilateral agencies have registration requirements. Complete registrations before application deadlines approach. Tax treaties and legal structures affect how funds flow internationally. Some funding may be subject to withholding taxes unless proper documentation is in place. Organizations need legal and financial advice on structuring international funding relationships. Partnerships are essential for accessing most international funding, making relationship building a strategic priority. International partnerships are required for many programs and advantageous for most others. EU Horizon Europe typically requires multi-country consortia. Bilateral programs often require local implementing partners. Identify potential partners through conferences, professional networks, and existing relationships. International conferences in your field bring together potential partners. Professional associations may have international membership. Start with who you know and expand strategically. Begin building relationships before specific opportunities arise. Rushed partnerships assembled for immediate deadlines rarely succeed. Invest in relationships that can develop over time and be activated when appropriate opportunities emerge. Clarify roles, responsibilities, and expectations early in partnership development. Who will lead proposals? How will funds be shared? What contributions does each partner bring? Addressing these questions before they become contentious prevents problems later. Build trust through smaller collaborations first. Co-authoring papers, jointly presenting at conferences, or collaborating on small projects develops working relationships. Successful small collaborations build the foundation for larger joint proposals. Cultural considerations significantly affect international funding success, requiring attention and adaptation. Communication styles vary across cultures in ways that affect both partnership relationships and funder engagement. Directness, formality, and communication frequency all differ. What seems efficient in one culture may seem abrupt or rude in another. Decision-making processes differ internationally. Consensus-based decision-making common in some cultures contrasts with more hierarchical approaches elsewhere. Understanding partner decision-making helps navigate collaborations. Relationship-building expectations vary by culture. Some contexts require substantial personal relationship investment before business discussions. Others move more quickly to transactional engagement. Mismatched expectations create friction. Timeline expectations may differ from U.S. norms. Some cultures operate at a faster or slower pace than U.S. professional environments. Planning horizons and response times may need adjustment for international work. Investing in cultural competence for international work pays dividends in partnership quality and funder relationships. Cultural training, international experience, and diverse team composition all contribute to cultural capability. Finding international funding opportunities requires monitoring multiple sources and building networks that surface opportunities. Funder websites list opportunities directly and are authoritative sources. The European Commission's Funding and Tenders Portal, UN agency procurement portals, and foundation websites provide direct access to official calls. Aggregator databases compile opportunities from multiple sources. Services like DVEX, Funds for NGOs, and Foundation Center databases help identify relevant international opportunities. Some aggregators require subscription. Professional networks share emerging opportunities through listservs, social media, and direct communication. Colleagues working internationally often learn about opportunities before formal announcements. Network relationships provide early intelligence. Sector-specific publications announce calls and discuss funding trends. Development sector publications, research policy journals, and professional magazines cover international funding developments. Proactive relationship building surfaces unpublished opportunities. Some funders work through invitation or expression of interest rather than open calls. Relationships with program staff can lead to invitations that others never see. Before pursuing international funding, assess whether your organization is positioned for success. Evaluating mission alignment with international funding priorities helps focus effort. If your work is fundamentally local or domestic in scope, international funding may require stretching beyond your natural focus. Alignment should be genuine, not manufactured. Assessing capacity for international financial management reveals whether systems can handle the complexity. International work involves multiple currencies, international transfers, varying compliance requirements, and complex reporting. Financial systems and staff must be capable. Considering staff expertise in international contexts helps gauge readiness. Does your team have experience working internationally? Language skills? Cultural competence? International networks? These capabilities take time to develop. Reviewing systems for multi-partner collaboration assesses administrative readiness. International work typically involves managing subgrants, coordinating across organizations, and navigating partner dynamics. Strong project management systems support success. Determining appetite for complexity and longer timelines ensures leadership commitment. International funding is often slower, more complex, and more uncertain than domestic funding. Organizations must be prepared for this reality. Organizations new to international funding should build capability gradually rather than attempting major proposals immediately. Beginning with funders closest to your current work leverages existing strengths. If you already work on global health issues, international health funders are natural targets. Build outward from areas of established expertise. Seeking partnership opportunities with experienced international organizations provides learning while contributing value. Organizations with international track records can lead proposals while you contribute substantive expertise and develop experience. Starting as subcontractor or partner before leading proposals allows you to learn international systems without bearing full responsibility. Observe how experienced organizations manage international funding before taking the lead yourself. Building track record through smaller international projects creates credentials for larger opportunities. International funders, like domestic funders, want evidence that you can deliver. Small successes build credibility for larger proposals. Developing internal expertise gradually over time ensures sustainable international capacity. Hire or develop staff with international experience. Build financial and administrative systems step by step. Patience and capacity development pays dividends. Today's lesson provided an overview of the international funding landscape. We established that international funding expands available resources for organizations whose work has global dimensions or could benefit from international perspectives. Major categories of international funders include bilateral aid agencies like USAID and FCDO, multilateral organizations like UN agencies and the World Bank, supranational bodies like the European Union, and international philanthropies like Wellcome Trust and the Gates Foundation. Key differences from U.S. domestic funding require adaptation. Application formats differ, consortium requirements are common, procurement-style processes are prevalent, and currency and compliance issues add complexity. Eligibility varies across funders and programs. Partnerships and cultural competence are essential for international funding success. Building international relationships before opportunities arise, clarifying partnership expectations, and developing cultural capabilities all contribute to success. Organizations should assess readiness and build international capacity gradually. In our next lesson, we examine European Union funding in depth with particular focus on Horizon Europe as the EU's flagship research and innovation program. Thank you for engaging with these concepts about international funding opportunities.